You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney, and I'm excited to have you guys here with me again this week. I hope everyone is doing well. We are umpteenth week into pandemic, so much that we've lost track of where we're at. We may have lost our minds. We've gone into that scenario where we're starting to do our own hair care. So you kind of know that we've come around a curve where I'm beginning to see more and more of my friends kind of dabbling and trying their hand out at cutting their own hair or cutting a spouse's hair or a child's hair. Luckily for me, my wife has been the only person that's cut my hair for probably the past 20 years. So I'd look just as bad as the rest of you guys. I've been preparing for a pandemic my whole life is really what it's been. So, but seriously, I do hope everyone is doing well, is staying mentally and physically healthy in this really unique time where we find ourselves. And so today we're going to kind of hopefully, I say this probably every week, at least I say it to myself, hopefully this is all going to make sense in the end of the hour. But something I've been really pondering through lately, I wanted to tack on to kind of the flow of shows we've been having lately over the similar topic that we've been having. We've been talking about kind of in a wider arcing narrative. I've been really talking about more the servanthood or the servant way of following Jesus. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to mix that in a bit with where we find ourselves today, because what I've been noticing, whether it be across the news or social media or in conversations I'm having with people, I continue to kind of hear really just two camps. And I'm not trying to draw a line saying that one is left-leaning and right-leaning, one is conservative, one is liberal. But that's not my point that I'm making here, even though you can make those connections. My point I want to mention here is what I've seen is two types of people and how they're responding to where we are at right now. And I see a group of people that feel like we need to get life back to normal as quick as possible. We need to get it back to how it was before. And we need to do that like a month ago. So we have folks that feel like they're stuck, they're being oppressed, the economy's going to the crapper. We need to get back to where we were. And then there's another camp of folks that kind of tries to say, here's where we're at, where are we going? Or how do we walk out of here? What is a responsible way for us to be able to walk out of this? And the more I've been kind of just listening to these conversations and participating minimally in a lot of these, but the thing that continues to just strike me is this, is that the way that life moves is forward. Like the way that we humans perceive time and how it moves is forward, right? You don't go back in time. We don't get to Marty McFly things. And so we will never be what we were before. Now, I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that as last Thursday's Stuart is not the same as this Tuesday's Stuart. Do you see what I'm saying? Like Stuart 20 years ago is not the same as Stuart right now. So like the very nature that we embrace as humans as we move forward is change. I mean, change is the only constant in life. And the more that we grow older, hopefully wiser as we move forward, we begin to realize that we continue to change every day. So this idea inherently of going back, it's absurd. We can't go back. We can't rewrite the past. And for those that tend to look at the past and say, we need to go back to how it was before, are the same folks that say we need to go back to how it was in the 1950s. And when they look back to how things were before, what they tend to do is ignore, and they tend to, for lack of a better term, whitewash the past. In how we look at it, saying that we want to go back to an idealized time that never really existed. And we need to be people that are accepting of the past. We need to learn from the past. We need to be awake in the present to what is happening, and using those things as we are awake now to then use our brains I'm sorry, some of this feels like it's elementary school. But then we take all this information and then decide to move forward. How do we make decisions moving forward, right? The decision a 6-year-old you would make is very different than a 30-year-old you. Kind of tracking with me here? It's pretty, like, I don't feel like this is too far out of it, out of the ordinary for us to think about. But I think the same thing gets applied to where we're at here during COVID, that the humans we were that entered into this time period and the humans that we will be exiting this time period will inherently be different. The landscape has changed. The world has changed. And we need to just embrace change and look towards what we can do moving forward. Because all of this hearkening back to getting back to what it used to be, it's not going to happen. Trying to recreate a past that has already gone is fruitless. And I stumbled onto, and we're going to be talking about a bit of this, a bit of church and leadership, and really what are the ways of Jesus today in the midst of the new normal, and what do we do with ourselves as we move forward? That's a rough idea of where we're going through this. But this thing struck out to me. This is from an article which I did appreciate from the Religious News Service this week, called "Clergy and Scientists Grapple with Thoughts on Worship Without Congregational Singing." And so the article was talking about this idea of really being able to re-look at the way we're doing worship without doing singing worship. And this quote, I think it stuck out to me. This is from John Whitlet, something like that. I don't know. John Whitlet, the director from the Calvin Institute Christian Worship. Sorry, John. And he said this in the article. He said, based on the science that we are learning about this week, we are urging, and I'm personally urging, extreme caution. And he said, singing together in a congregation is a practice that we dearly love and we are eager to promote. But loving our neighbor is job one. And so the time for fasting from this wonderful practice may be longer than any of us would like. And I loved how he said that the idea of getting together, even like choirs getting together to sing, is very problematic when we're talking about viruses and pandemic. But I loved really just how he said this, is singing together in congregation is a practice that we dearly love and we are eager to promote, but loving our neighbor is job number one here. So the time for fasting from this wonderful practice may be longer than any of us would like. But I love this idea of fasting and being able to look at fasting in a different way. Typically, when we went in the church and we hear fasting, we assume it has to do with food. What we are not eating, we're going to emaciate ourselves. But sometimes we don't think of this as fasting from certain practices. And I wish in my dear state of North Carolina, where I find myself now, that churches would also latch onto that we want to love our neighbor, and by loving our neighbor, we are going to fast from doing group gatherings and group worship services. Because yes. Last week, North Carolina had one of the country's most religiously accommodating COVID policies. Governor Roy Cooper had a directive to churches that worship services involving more than 10 people should be held outdoors unless impossible. Okay? fairly decent, fairly open for what we can do. But, no. That wasn't good enough for people. So we had to go, yes. And so people had to challenge us in court because, again, is loving your neighbor important? No. Is having church service important? Yes. So this was challenged in a federal court and got overturned. So guess what? Yay, in North Carolina, people can worship and virally fornicate as they do their worshiping of Jesus all they want. They're challenging this in court. They're getting their ways as we continue to hear stories week after week of churches that are ignoring this, churches that are continuing to hold services, becoming small epicenters of breakouts of coronavirus. This is simply just an act of hubris and arrogance and selfishness by the churches. Oh no! If we can't worship Jesus, he won't exist anymore. I think God's all right. I think God is pretty chill. I think the way that we are making this is kind of really how we look at American Christianity these days. We can kind of see very obviously how this is just selfish. Some pastors are using this to show themselves as being men. We're standing up for the Lord. And other people are just being whiny bitches about this. And I just don't see what the big deal is. And especially even if we see how the church has learned how to churn out what church is online, it just kind of seems like a TED Talk and watching some music videos, right? Is that really what we're at right now? Is that really what the church is about? No. This should be a time where the church is like, man, game on. Pandemic, we've been preparing for this our whole lives. Let's go and be a congregation to those around us. Let's be Jesus to those that need that loving, that compassionate neighbor, where we can reach out to others and help others in our own ways. We have been equipped. We know what we're supposed to do, and we shouldn't need a church service to tell us what we're supposed to do. So just Netflix and chill and be a good neighbor. So no, that's not fully where we're going today. But we're going to be talking about a lot about Christian practice and where we are at today and how we can use this time to be able to transform and to be able to change us. And as we are doing this, let's hop into one of the ways that we look across the landscape of American Christianity, the Christian crazy of the week. It's going to be pretty brief this week because I want to just make just a few points with all these nutter butters because, again, there's plenty of Christian crazy every week that goes on just because you don't hear it here. Sometimes I just lose my patience with it. Sometimes it's just so dumb or sad or nasty. It's not even fun to make fun of. But come on. I'm pretty sure somewhere. So right now, we're fasting from singing, but let's learn a new spiritual practice of holy mockery. Maybe we shall call it like that too, right? It's or a better word, snarky faith. You've come to the right place. So let's delve really quickly into the insanity of Christianity of the week, the Christian crazy. Here we go.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He know what I want.
Now, the theme that really kind of enticed me this week in the Christian crazy was prophets prophesying and then walking back their prophecies when they didn't come true, or kind of having to prophet-splain how they were really right, even though everyone else has eyeballs and knows womp womp, right? We kind of know that kind of a thing too. Okay. So love this. Okay. So Rick Wiles is a favorite here. He's on the Hall of Fame of the Christian crazy. And for some reason, Rick, and I love this how folks do this. They like to bring this stuff up when no one asked. Or it was a troll that was mentioning, hey, you prophesied and what? So you got to answer the trolls. No, you don't. You just mock the trolls and have fun with them. That's really all they're there for, right? Okay. So Rick Wiles from True News TRU News, who also, I say this every time, was a White House press pass. Yeah. They're ridiculous news, but what isn't in this day and age? So yes, Rick Wiles had made some predictions, some prophecies, said something's going to happen. Didn't quite go that way. But you don't know that it didn't. You don't know.
Last year, at the beginning of 2019, I told our True News audience that this ministry would go underground by the end of 2019. And I stand by that. And when January came, 2020, there were, of course, the critics online who said, well, Rick Wiles, he prophesied he was going to go underground by the end of 2019. There he is. He's still there, and I see him, and he's not underground. Well, they don't know. They don't know what steps I took.
They don't know that I have a basement, suckers, and I walk underground like every day. So, sucks to be you. No, that's not what he's getting at. But let's just let Rick finish.
They don't know. Okay? Because I spent 2019 getting ready. Because the Lord said, you'll be going underground by the end of 2019. Yep. We did internally start to go underground in 2019.
So don't you worry. We didn't go underground physically, but mentally, we're already there. So what now? What now, prophetic skeptics? I went there in my mind. Didn't think that was coming. Fools, all of you. So next we have in the prophecy retread category, Mark Taylor, who is known as the firefighter prophet, who also gets his words from the Lord, but also QAnon. And so Mark is responding to all those fools. That they like to call him out on his red tsunami prophecy back in 2018, where he prophesied saying there was going to be a red tsunami in government. So Mark's going to try to clear up the air here because, Mark cares about crap like that. No, he just cares about himself.
I prophesied there was going to be a red tsunami in the midterms, and I got hammered because we lost the House. We didn't lose the House, Francine. Most of those people in the House are not supposed to be there. They were after the Senate. Q even confirmed the Senate. We picked up 6 red governorships, which are huge. Why was that huge? We're seeing it now because people are, when I said that, like, oh, that's 6 governorships, big deal. No, it is a big deal now. Now you're seeing how big of a deal having a red governor is right now, especially right now in these tyrannical, with what's going on, these tyrannical governors.
So when he's saying red governors, he's talking about states like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. Wait, did he mean that? Did he mean that politically, or was he talking about their necks? The rednecks in the South. Oh my God. That's just not nice, Mark Taylor. That's not nice, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of rednecks that listen to you.
But, we did not lose the House. I believe they allowed it to happen. So, again, to let people see and experience who these Democrats were, how bad they really were, so that people could experience for themselves so that they will never be able to get back into office again.
So the math goes that God or Q are probably just the same thing, allowed this to happen to be able to educate people. So your prophecy was right, but there's like a stipulation and a footnote at the bottom of the page. The Q really, okay, yeah, none of that makes any sense at all, Mark Taylor. But, I really do appreciate you trying. Just don't collect $200 when you pass go. So last up in the Christian Crazy, we have Rodney Howard-Browne. Because Rodney Howard, remember Rodney Howard, he's a martyr. He got arrested for having church services. And he'll tell you online, he's still having church services. I mean, YouTube, he's got followers, right? So yeah, he's still having church services, even though the legal ones that got him in trouble, they're not doing in their church building anymore. They're just doing it virtually like all the other people are doing churches. So the reason that you're saying now, Rodney Howard-Browne, that you're still having church, but you're doing it virtually like every other church, it doesn't really make sense why you had to. Okay, yes. You're just an idiot. Don't believe me that Rodney Howard-Browne is an idiot? Oh, let's listen to him and his wife talk about the fact that, wait, beware if you've ever had a flu shot, because whatever they're going to say right now isn't going to make any sense anyways, but it's just crazy.
And even if they do the test, if you had a flu shot in the last 10 years, you will test positive for COVID-19. People have no clue what's going on. And unfortunately, I know what's going on. And I've done my best. I've tried my best over these years.
And the reason you're going to test positive is because they're all as common cold as a coronavirus. And so the tests are not discerning which coronavirus that it is. And so if you had that flu shot, as according to a doctor, that even over the last 10 years, if you had that flu shot, then those viruses are going to show up and they're going to just automatically assume that it's COVID, the same way that they're just automatically assuming that all these deaths are COVID.
Well, I do appreciate Miss Howard-Browne quoting from a doctor. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good scientific research right there. A doctor once said. A doctor said. So, yes. So they are, again, continuing to spin nonsense. Because I'm glad that Rodney Howard-Browne is still on the airwaves, giving us the truth of what we need to know. Because, of course, he's an expert in this field. Wait, why is he an expert in this field? Well, Rodney Howard-Browne didn't go to college, but he still has a doctorate of ministry from a non-accredited Pentecostal correspondence school in California. It's been described as a diploma mill. So he's well equipped to be telling us and educating us on issues of health or anything. Yeah. But this is the weird state where we are at nowadays within like Christianity and within life. Because I know that the world is weird right now. I know that life is kind of topsy-turvy and upside down right now. I know stuff doesn't always make sense right now. But, let's just call out BS when it's BS. What? Rodney Howard-Browne, who spells his last name Browne. I would prefer... Now, I know. I wish it was Rodney Howard-Browne. I just think that would kind of soften his image a little bit. Oh, you little brownie. Oh, a little brownie. But I will offer you this. Mainly one of the main reasons. Something I've enjoyed lately. I will do this in live time. Maybe. I'm not making any promises because I don't necessarily like wasting my evenings on Rodney Howard-Browne. But supposedly, he does a 3-hour live stream in the evenings where oftentimes he gets into arguments with trolls on there. I started off by saying, don't feed the trolls. But I think it's like a troll having a troll show and then trying to own trolls. And it's really, really sad to watch him try to own people. But since he is the man with the microphone, he looks like, yeah, I got you. Yep. It's if you're bored and have nothing to do in the evening, look up Rodney Howard-Browne, spelled Brown, Browne, Brownie. Rodney Howard-Browne live stream, because he does these in the evening, where he fills 3 hours with arguing with people, amongst other things. So yes, if you have nothing better to do, have fun. But we do all of that because I wanted to kind of get a bit of a pulse on where we're at here. Where we're at here in 2020. We're at here in the midst of where we're at in the coronavirus. And when I was doing research for the show, I kept seeing poll says this, poll says this, poll says this, poll says this. So let's go through some disturbing polls before we descend into our main topic of where we're going this hour. But there's a couple disturbing polls that I was reading. And the first one is really just the most disturbing. The second one will be a lot of the basis of what we're talking about today. So the first one, this comes from Christian Post. So, of course, it comes from Christian Post. But in their article. This is crazy, and it tells me that people aren't learning anything. So this is an article. I'd go ahead and give up the ghost here. That belief by church attendees that Trump was anointed by God is on the rise. This is if you want to know when, May 12th, 2020. We've already been through almost 4 years of Trump. Well, Trump's been in the public eye as a presidential nominee or candidate for more than 4 years. And we've had enough time to be able to know that he is an idiot and a bull artist. And still, during this time of pandemic, thanks, white evangelicals. So in the article says, amongst white Protestants who attend church once a week or more, belief that Trump was anointed by God has increased from 29.6% last year to 49.5% this year, according to a report entitled Trump the Anointed? That was published by Religion and Public. Now, again. Let's put this in perspective. These are white Protestants. So again, we're like just doing a small section of the pie here, who attend church more than once a week. Have from last year to where we're at right now, in the midst of pandemic, white Protestants have said, by and large, up to almost half, oh, hell yes. Oh, hell yes. He's been anointed by God. Yeah. Gonna let that just sit in your mouth for a little bit. Kind of sit in your soul just for a moment here. Anointed by God is your God a narcissistic asshole? Sorry. That's the easiest way I could put it. What the fuck? I was trying to be good today. I am sorry. I mean, I could understand if you were saying he was politically advantageous to your beliefs and your narrow view of being able to only love people that look like you or only be like Jesus to people that look like you. I mean, I could understand that from like a homophobic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, a lot of phobics here. I could understand that if that was your standpoint, like that would make sense. But to then make that step, like out of the realm of politics, to saying he is God, the God of the universe, and that God is saying, this is my anointed, and with him I am well pleased. See, that's where it kind of like explodes in my brain. Like I can accept a lot of the other ones, but that part I'm kind of like, what? Have you read the Gospels? Oh, white Protestants have not. White Protestants have no idea what the Gospels are, is what I've really kind of come to understand here. I have no idea. Have none. Zero zilch, right? You could say he's a politician that does our bidding, that makes us happy with the people that he hates. Great. Good. I'm down with you there. I'm not down with you there. I can understand your perspective. Let me correct myself saying that. Because you guys have done all that kind of nasty hate stuff in the past. But to go to take the step and say, yeah, this is what God wants. That's messed up. That is messed up. I even think Jesus would be going like, what the fuck? But literally that was my translation from the Message Bible. So again, it's more of a paraphrase of what Jesus said or may have said, or just like the heart or the spirit of what Jesus said there. That's just me and my translation. All right, but that's not the main poll I want to talk about. That was one that just stuck out to me that I really felt like I had to at least have a little bit of therapy with you guys with. Okay, so the next poll. Here's the thing that I saw erupt all across different news sources. Okay, first saw this. This is a poll by the University of Chicago Divinity School and the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. So this pops up on Religious News Service, Christian Post, Relevant Magazine, Guardian, and much more. So this survey goes out and found that 31% of Americans feel strongly that God is telling humanity to change is that God is telling humanity to change during this time period. Many people are saying, oh, they feel like that God is saying that, this virus is a sign that is telling humanity to change. And other people do believe that God is trying to speak through this, okay? Now, evangelical Protestants are a little bit more likely to believe this than others, but we are seeing this. We are seeing this, that amongst Americans, that they believe that God is trying to tell them something through this pandemic. There's a message here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say he's not. Now, I'll say that with many caveats. So, first of all, I'm not a fan of assigning God to natural occurrences, whether it be a earthquake or a flood or a hurricane or a pandemic. When we try to say that, well, God is doing this because of this. No. There are hurricane seasons, and certain areas of the world are more apt to natural disasters than others. So if God is constantly trying to tell us a message to people that live along fault lines or that live in an area where hurricanes happen, God's really just a broken record. And I don't think God is that way. I think there are natural occurrences. I think there are natural things that happen in the world that are just because life. And for us to assign them to God is kind of weird and messed up and gets really into that like blasphemous area that like really belongs in the Christian crazy. Because I've heard all sorts of stuff within the folks in the Christian crazy, especially with conservatives, using this to blame this. Right now, there's a controversy happening because John Piper's book, his audiobook, got booted off of YouTube. Because why? Well, in this controversial book that he has about COVID, because again, he's apparently prolific, I just think that he has enough writing history on hate. He can make hate fit into any situation. So yeah, good on Piper. But with Piper, yes, is also asserting that somehow that COVID is the Lord's way of telling us that homosexuality is bad. Oh, good. God, how old is John Piper? Why is he dead? Not dead yet. Oh, crap, the mic was still on for that one. Okay, I'll have to... Sorry, I'll delete that later in post. I won't. But I hate assigning these things and saying it's because of God. Now, what I want to reframe the conversation around for the rest of our time here is what we started talking about. Is that we will never be what we were before. Right? I said this at the beginning of the hour. We will never be what we were before. We can't go back. We can't rewrite the past. Instead, we need to kind of look at our past in an accepting way because, hey, the past, your past self, yourself from a week ago, from a month ago, from a decade ago, right? That self knew less than it does now. So we can accept our past, we can learn from our past, and we can move on. And in these times of grand pause, where we see that our life is put on hold, we can ask the question, not, God, why did you do this? But, what can you do with this, where we are at now? Because guess what, folks? It is not that often that we have a global pause on life. But it's much more common that you in your own spaces have pauses in life. Maybe someone in your family gets cancer. Someone gets ill. Someone dies. You lose your job. Something changes. Something shifts underneath you, and you have to begin to deal with life in a new and different way. See, in these times of pause, I believe God gives us the opportunity to be able to kind of look at the world, look at where we're going, kind of like give us a time to take a breath and say, do I want to continue on the path that I've been on, or maybe I want to do something different? Now, I don't like assigning, again, I'm going to say this again, assigning COVID to God trying to get our attention. Again, that really just makes God a profound dick, which I would wholeheartedly disagree in. And that's not the God that I know and have experienced. Now, what makes me mad about it is the way that people frame God in that way and make it seem like God is like, I love you so much. Smallpox. Oh, because I love you. Car wreck. Cancer to you because I just love you so much. I want to bring you home faster. Yeah, if you really think about the way people frame that, it kind of gets weird and sick. So first of all, a lot of Americans believe God is trying to get their attention, so maybe that's a good thing. I do not believe, to rephrase, that God is causing this. But I do believe that in most situations, we can use them to change and become better, right? I feel like that's simple, that's easy, that's logical, that's not Christian crazy, that's not trying to make this anything that is more spiritual than it needs to be. These times are opportunities, give us space to be able to take stock, to take a breath, and to gain perspective. And we started this topic last week, kind of generally talking through a book I'm rereading during this, and I don't always have time to kind of return to books, so this has been a good time for me. It's a book called Tug of War by one of my former professors, Wilmer Villacorta. Wilmer is a special voice to me and continues to be one that I deeply, deeply respect his heart and the heart that he has for Jesus. And so we were kind of beginning to unpack in the last episode a bit of structures of power, and why certain structures of power can be problematic and dangerous. Why we end up using words like pastor and prayer, and we assume what they mean, but they don't really always mean what they mean. Like there's larger definitions to those things. So if you're interested in that, go back to our last episode, which you can find anywhere they have podcasts. Look for Snarky Faith, or go to www.snarkyfaith.com. And so I wanted to talk a bit about framing the powerless way of God. And I'm going to end up quoting certain things from this book that I'm kind of been wading through. But I want this to be something that when we see large swaths of American Christians having really no idea what God's about and what God's nature is, assuming God's just going to throw a pandemic at us for funsies, I think it begins to tell us that we have no idea what God's nature is. And within Christianity, that should be the easiest thing for us to be able to ascertain and understand of God's nature, because you just look to the ways and teachings of Jesus. And I know that I harp this in a simplistic way week after week about Jesus being compassionate and graceful and loving and self-sacrificial. And in this, we're going to talk through systems of power and what we are called to do and what kind of postures we are called to do as people that follow in the way and teachings and the mold of Jesus. So let's descend there. Let's hop into this. So quoting directly from the book, as we read the gospel stories, we constantly encounter the ways in which the divine life of God embraces the vulnerability and powerlessness of the human condition. A startling revelation indeed, and very, very good news. And if you are at all a person that is versed in the Gospels, you know that the Gospels are filled with stories of the manger, of God entering the world as a baby of an immigrant that is born into poverty. We know that through countless stories and symbolism, we are told that the Lord is like a lamb, like a sacrificial lamb. We see that Jesus, at his height of glory, rides into Jerusalem on a donkey. Jesus constantly tells us to have the faith of a child. Before Jesus dies, he gets down on his knees and he washes his disciples and his followers' feet. And even through the Eucharist, we know that Jesus says that this bread is my body and this wine is my blood, and I give it up to you, not not in a cannibalistic way, but in a way that says, all that I am, I give up. Because I know this is the better way to live. Living an existence of self-sacrifice for the greater good of those in the world around us, in our community around us, in our neighborhoods around us, is a life that is marked with difference, and it is a life that is drenched in the gospel story. But yet, we somehow forget it. We somehow forget this and assume that God just wants to kick ass and take names, and God wants to own the libs, or God wants to shut this down, or this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. But we don't see a God that's saying that. We see a God that says that oppressing others is bad. A God that says that not caring for your neighbor is bad. God saying not caring for the earth is bad. So caring is good. Being selfless and callous and only caring about your own needs, that's not Jesus's way. Even though it does sound like a lot of pastors right now. Can I get an amen on that one? Herm. Yes. But in this chapter that I was going through that I wanted to share with you, I wanted to go through some different examples because we know this. It's easy to point to Jesus. It's easy to point and say, look, go be Jesus. Go be like that man. Go be like that man that lived 2,000 years ago. Go be like him. It's also great for women. Go be like a man. No, but we talk about wanting to kind of live out the ethos and the heartbeat of Jesus. It's best seen when we look to contemporaries, when we look to people from, I want to say roughly modern culture. And so in the time remaining today, we're going to talk about 3 different people that Mr. Villacorte here outlines as we begin to look towards this downward descent, this servant leadership kind of posture. And the first of those that we're going to go through, we're going to talk about Mother Teresa. We're going to talk about Oscar Romero, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You guys game for that for the rest of our time? I think you are, because if not, you wouldn't be listening right now. Makes you think, doesn't it? Makes you think. So let me read you a short excerpt about Mother Teresa here. In the eyes of many, Mother Teresa remains an icon of service amongst the poorest of the poor. Her legacy continues until this day through the lives of many missionaries of charity, pouring out her heart for the least of these. She touched the broken body of Jesus in the lives of the poor. Mother Teresa's way reflected a stunning powerlessness, both physically and spiritually. And yet, she'd walked into a room full of people. It's likely that no one would have noticed her. To the curious, however, she offered a simple yet profound reason for her deep commitment to the poor. For instance, when sought after by representations of the Vatican inquiring about her request for a new order, she explained the central conviction that undergirded her ministry to the poor. Whether you touch the broken bodies of the poor, you are doing it for me. Reference to the words of Jesus recorded in Matthew 15:40. And those words were the foundation of her calling. When Jesus said, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. And she took that very seriously. She took that call of Jesus very literally and very seriously. And it's fascinating to me how many can read the Bible and take many, many scriptures that are not really meant to be literal. But they'll take them that way because it benefits them. But taking these scriptures are not an act of selfishness. This is an act of servitude. And this is one of the marks of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And that cannot be escaped. And another example for us to see, I'll just take straight from the text of the book, where Mr. Villacorte says this: the writings of Monsignor Oscar Romero may prove helpful. Monsignor Romero, a martyr of El Salvador, who faced suppression and ultimately assassination by a powerful death squad, once said, "Power is good, but abuse by humans has made it something to fear. All has been created by God, but humans have subjected it to sin." And although he faced and confronted the unjust systems of power in his context of El Salvador, he nonetheless viewed power as something good, though stained through human sin. Many fear power because of its trampling of the human condition. God knows the precarious reality of it for human beings and offers an alternative way, the relinquishment of all forms of oppressive power to embrace creative and compassionate power. Scripture, particularly the Gospels, shows us time and time again the ways that God comes near to human beings and shows us a different perspective on power. What God brings forth in Jesus Christ remains the greatest mystery of the Christian life, the mystery that contains the complete identification of the divine with the human story. He embraces not only our humanity, but particularly aligns with those who have less. The poor, the voiceless, the oppressed, the outcast, the rejected. So if the gospel ends up aligning with those that are powerless, why is the church today, why are the religious so busy aligning themselves with the fat, bloated, orange, and powerful? Why do people run there? I know they'll make their excuses. It's because I like to vote my faith. It's because of this president is pro-life, and my God is pro-life. But we won't be pro-life once the child is born, or all the way until the child dies. So then, are we really pro-life at all? Mm-hmm. See, the hard thing about walking in the ways of Jesus is the fact that it's not easy. Yeah, I know, no doubt. But, I mean, it also is not easy because it confronts our very selfish natures. It confronts the what I want. It confronts the American dream. It actually confronts really a lot of the ideas of the founders, this idea of manifest destiny, this idea that you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you do your best and you will succeed. So when you hear things being talked about that we are founded as a Christian nation, look at our history on war, look at our history on oppression and how we've treated those that are less than. I would rather align myself with the ways of Jesus than align myself with the ways of power. And lastly, what I wanted to talk about too is again, one of my favorites that I return to from time to time again. I was back in seminary. I remember having it was an awesome class and a terrible class. It was the entire works of Dietrich Bonhoeffer in a short period of time. So it was fantastic, but it was like drinking from the fire hose, and it was a lot to do. But I continue to return to the works of Bonhoeffer as he continues to inform us and speak to us even today. And even in this book too, that Villacorta continues to circle back to Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And I'm going to kind of close my show by talking a little bit more about Bonhoeffer and us. So I'm going to go back to the book. Dietrich Bonhoeffer chose to follow God down the path of suffering. His incarceration under the Third Reich for treason against its regime left him totally powerless. After securing a successful career in the United States at a well-respected seminary, he chose to take a path of risk by returning to Germany to be amongst the faithful resistance. And as a result of his commitment to suffering with his people, the people of his nation, he endured interrogation, harassment, and ultimately execution. His letters and papers from prison contains a heart-wrenching cry for justice, and each poem and meditation and prayer he wrote communicates the depth of his humanity, his thirst for God, and his relentless passion to know himself. Perhaps his most memorable and substantial writings, these missives have become a masterpiece of his spirituality in the midst of the darkest hour of life, emerging from the complete and powerlessness he endured. No power of any regime could crush the lasting impact and force of the lines of his haunting poem, Who Am I? And I'll read this here because I think this is all for us, still and today. Who am I? They often tell me. I would step from my cell's confinement, calmly, cheerfully, firmly, like a square from his country house. Who am I? They often tell me. I would talk to my wardens freely and friendly and clearly, as though it were mine to command. Who am I? They also tell me I would bear the days of misfortune, equitably, smilingly, proudly, like one accustomed to win. Am I then all that which other men tell of? Or am I only what I know of myself? Restless and longing and sick like a bird in a cage, struggling for breath as though the hands were compressing my throat, yearning for colors, for flowers, for voices of the birds, thirsting with anger at the despotisms and petty humiliations, tossing in expectation of great events, powerlessly trembling for friends at the infinite distance, weary and empty at praying and thinking, at making, faint and ready to say farewell to it all. Who am I? This or the other? Am I one person today or tomorrow another? Am I both at once, a hypocrite before others and before myself, a contemptibly woebegone weakling? Or is something within me still like a beaten army, fleeing in disorder from victory already achieved? Who am I? They mock me. These lonely questions of mine, who am I? Thou knowest, O God, that I am thine. And Bonhoeffer's deep spirituality emerged in the midst of this physical and emotional isolation during the last weeks of his life. His complete sense of powerlessness allowed the birth of a magnificent strength that proclaimed the depth of God's love and victory in the midst of impenetrable darkness. The longing of this powerless life aligned with the cry of a fulfilled freedom of our Lord, voiced while suffering at the cross, it is finished. And we, not in the same way, are at a time of isolation. We're at a time of distance. We're at a time where we are questioning things. Third of all America right now is questioning, is God trying to tell me something? Is there a message in COVID for us? Now, I don't necessarily think that God is trying to tell us a message from this, but I do think that we can get messages from this. I think that we can stay awake and aware and begin to ask those hard questions of us right now. But what will we become? What will we do? Where will we go when we step out of this place? How will you be changed now so that you can engage to change world when this world opens back up? I don't want to go back to those church services. I don't want to go back to singing. I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to playing church. Because also, to quote, as we end the show here, to quote The Weeknd in his song Scared to Live. And this is a song really about like emotional, I think an emotional, unhealthy relationship. But it really feels like to me, when I was reading this feels like the song of the church calling out to us right now. Not the big C church. This is kind of the institutional local church. And I think like it's kind of having a moment of really being able to be honest with itself, but isn't really coping well with it. I don't know. This is my take on it from The Weeknd. I'm making it make what it wants to make sense right now. So he says this: when I saw the signs, I should have let you go, but I kept you beside me. And if I held you back, at least I held you close. You should have known that you were lonely. I know things will never be the same. Time we lost will never be replaced. And I'm the reason that you forgot to love. So don't be scared to live again. Don't be scared to live again. And the church, in many ways, the institutional church may have failed us. Pastors may continue to spout off self-serving and selfish screeds and rants. But ultimately, we're just really called to go back to the heart of Christ. The church in America may be dying right now, but that's not a bad news necessarily. If we can return to that ways and those postures of Jesus, we can be people that make a difference. So go and make a difference, no matter how small. No matter how small. Make a difference in a way that makes sense in your own space. So as we end this broadcast, just a reminder that you can catch us on podcast at www.snarkyfaith.com. You can also subscribe to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. And also, just want to shout out that, hey, you can message me at questions@snarkyfaith.com. I do answer those. And also, if you want to, 919-525-1570. That's the Snarky hotline if you want to leave a message. I always forget to mention that on the show. But I send you out today with the holiest amount of grace and snark and peace. We can get through this time. We can learn to become better. We can engage the world in a better way and make a more hopeful and compassionate and graceful and loving tomorrow. So keep on keeping on. Keep doing the good work in your own spaces that you know that you're supposed to do. And I am out of here. I'll catch you guys again next week. Peace.